My name is Maciej Połczyński. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you for choosing the workshop and thank you for being here. It will be a little bit demanding, I hope, but also I believe at the end you will be rewarded with satisfaction and maybe a new skill for yourself. Just for the sake of, organizing, I will say that first I will introduce myself, then I will talk a little bit about variable typefaces and how they work. Then a little bit about, how it's different from the casual type design sort of production. I will go a little bit into history, but not much, not so that we don't die here. And then we will discuss the workshop's idea. Okay. So as you were presented, I run my own type foundry since 2018. It's called Live Type Foundry, which stands for amateur type foundry. So this indicates a little bit about myself and my education. I was very lucky to be a student of the Polish-Japanese Academy between 2013 and 2016, where I could meet a lot of great type designers. On the left, you can see Martin Mayer, Laura Metziger, and Joanna Correira. So this is me and the teachers that I've mentioned not being very happy about, the process they are going through with my typeface, my very early typeface. And what I wanted to show you is, some of the typefaces that were used by different design studios. This is from San Francisco Book Fair. This is the pizzeria that I mentioned from Uruguay by Estudio Mundial. And these are some of the typefaces. And as I mentioned, I like to play around with sort of different aesthetics, and it's not. And it's amazing for me how many ideas you can include in just 26 letters of the Latin alphabet, or 20 whatever it is. And going forward, running my own type foundry means that I can play around different ideas. I can play with my own type. I choose how to present it, and I choose if it's legible, or maybe this is in this case it's a little bit disturbing, I would say, even if you look at the left row of this letters. Sometimes it's more playful, sometimes it's more about the context, and it's pretty much since the very early time I did type design. It was a lot about movement and a lot of about how we can also play letters as sort of dynamic, because we have this idea of letters which are very much static information, like in this case, and we sort of maybe animate background, or we animate a character or illustration, but letters are pretty much still. And in case of variable types, which we'll try to play around with this workshops, you can create you can add a movement, you can add life to something which is as static as letters, which I find very intriguing. And anyway, so now to jump to the variable types, I was lucky to be around in Warsaw in 2016 for the PJAIT conference. If you don't know, this is one of the biggest conferences on type design, from type design industry, type design business, type design students, and so on and so on. A lot of sort of knowledge is being shared there. And in 2016 in Warsaw, the event was co-organized by our university. The three big companies, they announced something which may seem a little bit boring, and they introduced OpenType 1.8. Okay, so they introduced a new sort of format for the font files. And as you probably know, or you get to know soon, there are two different types of formats for the fonts. The TrueType and OpenType, I will not get into details on how and why. It's a little bit different sort of system of rendering on the screen for the letters. So let's get into science now, and a little bit a little bit more difficult stuff. What was this new format, as I mentioned, and it's called variable font. This is a screen from the documentation of Microsoft, and there is a very interesting quote here, which I will read. An open-type variable font is a single font that can behave like several fonts by using continuous interpolation between different designs, all defined within the single font. Okay, so we have a single font which includes different designs, and the computer is able to interpolate in between them. This is a very, I would say, I don't know, poetic or mind-bamboozling definition, but it's very accurate. And to present a little bit this idea, one of the Dutch type foundries called Underwear, they created this website which allows for a continuous interpolation between all the typefaces they designed, and I think it's called master typeface or something like this. So as you can see, as the cursor is moving around the screen, the letter is being changed to sort of fit the other design. Okay, so we have one font which includes different designs, and it can twin in between everything. Okay, so if we break it up to this classical approach to type design, you usually have this thin master, regular master, and bold master, or you go and have light, regular, and bold weight, okay, in your font. And as we design letters, there is this sort of system of coordinates which says, okay, the thin master is 100, the regular master is 400, and the bold master is 900. And as we design only these three elements or these three fonts, using the interpolation, the computer can render or even, let's say, design everything that is in between, okay? So using the basic parameters, the computer can create anything that is in between the ones that we designed. And if you know After Effects or if you know animation, this is pretty much like keyframes, okay? We define the keyframes and, for example, the most extreme position for our objects, and everything, the whole movement, everything in between is calculated by the computer. And what is typical, or what was before the variable fonts, is that every single typeface, every single weight or style of the typeface was a different file. Okay, so it's a different file that you have to download or install on your computer to be able to have all these big type families, as we call them. Now, as the variable type format is introduced, we still do the same. So we design the very extreme points, and the computer is able to calculate any single point on the axis that you can dream of. Okay, so it's not only the ones that I decided that you will be able to use, but you can use anything in between. And the most important thing about this is that this is a single font file. Okay, so this is just one file, whereas here we had 10 files or whatever number of styles we had. Okay, so this is just one single file. And if we design letters, or if you use fonts, they are described with Bezier curves. You can know from Illustrator or any other vector design software. That means we place these points on the grid, and the line is being drawn in between. Whereas, so every single typeface, every single font and weight has its own drawing, its own shapes. Whereas in case of variable type, what we do is we draw a shape, and we define for the computer the movement of the points. Okay, so the computer gets this, and it knows that if it's supposed to be bolder, then it should follow the, for example, black arrow. Okay, if you want to have a light typeface, then the point should go as the light gray arrows indicate. Okay. So this is a screen from Lawrence Cheney Samsa. I will show this to you in a second, and it shows you how complex this can be. As we will work on this today and this week, we will not really look into how the points move in this way. We will do it visually by changing the shape. But just to give you the idea of how the system is describing this, this is a very good representation. And here you can see how this looks as a typeface, and then so we have these two sort of axes, the weight and width, and the computer also calculates the movement for the points. Okay, is this sort of clear, more or less, for you guys?
Yes, it's clear.
So the most, let's say, the most obvious way of explaining this would be the keyframes of animation. Okay, so it's like keyframes, and then the vector is indicating the movement. So going back to this Microsoft documentation, here you can see we have this width and weight axis, and we have, let's say, our 4 masters, and again, the computer calculates everything in between. And as we move forward with variable fonts, you can have multiple axes, so it doesn't need to be only 2. It could be up to, I think, thousands of axes, which are very difficult to design, which we'll see. But this is just to give you an idea of how the design space, in a way, it's called design space, is being presented when we have more than 2 axes. Okay, so we design 2 or 3 letters, letter shapes, and then we get this sort of linear interpolation between the shapes. So this is sort of like a technical introduction to variable type. Let's see how it's being introduced. It's very interesting that the technology overlaps with this sort of dynamic approach to graphic design and visual communication. This is from Dia Studio. You probably, maybe you saw this. And it's very interesting, even though we don't, we don't manipulate the letters itself here. The rhythm and the motion for the poster, it sort of became the identity of its own. Okay, so we don't only have now logotype or type or color for the brand, but we also can have this sort of system of the movement, which is the identity for, in this case, Type Directors Club event in, I believe, New York. And you probably saw a lot of, I hope maybe on your social media, saw some of these images of this dynamic typeface. One of the early use case of variable fonts was, for example, Dropbox, which website is now using variable type. And I show this to you because, in a way, if we print a variable type, it remains static. It remains as it was printed. But when we have a dynamic medium such as website, where you change the width of the browser when you go mobile or you go desktop or whatever, then you have a lot of coding which can automatically adjust the typefaces to the needs or requirements of the certain device. Okay. Also, for example, Apple is using variable type to make sure that the typeface looks the same on every device they have. So they use the variable type format for this. Also, this was introduced by Adidas. It was very quickly. So I would say that this sort of possibility for the letters to move and grab our attention was very quickly introduced to the mainstream, and it became sort of a standard in graphic design or visual communication design, advertisement, and identity systems. And so in a way, this all could be achieved, of course, by animating and video rendering. But what is unique now is that this can be implemented on websites. There are, of course, also some more, let's say, maybe not creative, but side effects of this technology. Like in this case, the typearcher.com, he is the guy who creates these illustrations, which are in fact typefaces. Okay, so the car that you can see is a typeface. And as I mentioned, that it's crucial for the letters to be somehow coded as well. You can, for example, design a typeface which will be fully, or illustration which will be fully responsive to browser. So in this case, the ice is melting when we change the height of the browser. This is very, let's say, this is very playful. It's very advanced. It's very difficult, I would say, to create. It requires a lot of coding. We will not go into that difficult scenarios, but I would like to show this to you so that you sort of get the idea of how far you can go with the technology. And I must mention that this is not really a new technology. It was only refreshed because in 1994 there was this technology called multiple masters, and for example, one of the Dutch designers, Lucas de Groot, he designed his porno illustration alphabet using this technology. But it was a very, very early stage where we were not really able to implement this, for example, on the website, or probably there was still no smartphones in '94. I'm pretty sure about that. So this was a little bit, before the technology came to use this. And just to show you maybe a little clip on how different it is from anything that you can use on the web. Here is Lawrence Penny that I mentioned before on the .css conference in Paris. So a conference for web designers and developers and let's call them coding people, where he presents a little trick that he did with variable fonts. He's showing that he took the very famous photographs of the horse taken in the 19th century, which were done to prove that the horse is actually leaving the air, and he drew the shape of the horse as glyph, so it's a typeface. So let's say this is a horse emoji, and with this very sort of short code, HTML and CSS code, he wrote an animation for his website where the only content of the website is the horse emoji. Okay, so on the website you have the horse emoji, and with very little code, this is the animation. Okay, so it's not a static horse emoji, but it's an animation which is only 4 kilobytes big, so it's relatively very small comparing to any sort of vector animation or movie animation that could be included on the website. And he took it a little bit further, where he applied color to every single step of the horse. And yeah, so maybe I will just jump to here, and I will show you this in real case scenario. So this is Axis Praxis. This is the website of Lawrence Penny. And here you can see there is this horse emoji where we have, so I can type anything else, okay? But the horse is the only glyph in here. Anyway, so using the time axis, you can have the horse animated, okay? So this is only a letter that creates this animation, okay? And what is important is that we, of course, can scale it up and down and, introduce different colors and so on and so on. Okay, so this would be pretty much a short introduction to how and why the variable fonts. And I would like to talk a little bit about the type foundry. So this is the historical part, which will lead us to what I would like to design with you this workshop. And of course now, the type foundry can be just a single person with a laptop drawing letters, let's say on digitalizing, and then we have the letters for printing or for web or anything. So it's a very short process in a way, comparing to how it used to be in a pre-digital world. And here I would just like to explain what the type foundry actually means. So foundry is a place where you cast metal, and type refers to this little metal letters that were used for almost 500 years since 15th century. Okay, so type foundry is the place where they melt and cast letters, or at least it used to be, because of course now the type foundry refers to sort of like a design studio for letters. And it's very interesting. I find it very intriguing, how this technology influenced our life, how this metal type changed everything, and I believe this was one of the very most important discoveries of mankind, maybe print, which helped to spread the word and knowledge. So you probably know, but all the books before, they had to be aligned. Every single letter was placed in mirror image onto a special frame that would hold it, and then it could be printed. Then we had some new sorts of discoveries like linotype machine, that the printer would type in the whole lines, and the machine would cast the whole line of text, not a single letter. But it's pretty much still using the metal technology, which here you can see the recreation of Gutenberg's press in the Gutenberg Museum. And this printing process didn't really change much. So we had metal type, we had paper, and something to put pressure onto, so the ink would transfer. Well, of course, now we have more modern machines, so the human interaction, let's say, is a little bit gone. But it's crazy how this technology, this metal type, also formulated or created our language. So we have uppercase letters and lowercase letters, and I'm not sure if you know, but this comes from this very metal type printing world, when the top case was called uppercase and the lowercase was called, of course, lowercase. And this is because the big letters, the capitals, were used rarely, let's say, so they could be higher, so that there's not that much need to reach for them. So if you start a sentence, you only reach once to the uppercase, and you, of course, reach multiple times to the lowercase. Okay, so this is one of the examples how the technology created our language. One of the other examples would be the leading in between the types. So this distance between the lines of the text, we still call it leading. in English at least. And this comes from the fact that in order to space the single typefaces, we had to place some metal elements in between to give it a little bit more space. Okay, so here are two examples of how the technology formulated our language. But anyway, coming back to this this system or this process of type design, as I mentioned, now it's pretty easy to let's say design and sell typefaces, but it was not always like this in this world of metal type. What we had was a drawing, and then this would be translated in mirror image into a punch, which would create a matrix, which could then cast the type, and finally maybe produce print. Okay, so there was a lot of flipping of the image. First of all, there was a lot of physical work around this, and I'd like to show you how the sort of type foundry industry looked like in the 1950 in Switzerland. And this is the Haas type foundry, which brought, among others, typefaces, Helvetica. So you can see this is pretty much like a clean factory. Okay, so it was a industry creating metal typefaces. Here you can see the piles of metal to be used for later metal typefaces, which were then, of course, weighed, packed, and distributed. So there was a lot of this physical element in the industry. And now we have this, so we have this is Troy Leisner from the Heffler Type Foundry working on Gotham typeface that you probably know. It became famous for Obama campaign designing typefaces. Okay, so this is it's incredible how far the technology changed the type industry. And just to show you this, maybe again on the real life picture. So we have this metal block, which then the drawing is transferred onto. The letter is being cut out of the metal. It creates a temple that can be used to cast a metal typeface. So it was very time-consuming process. A lot of material also were used for this. And personally, for me, I find this element very incredible. The punch for the typeface. Even the drawing, I would say itself, is not that important as this element. While doing the research for the presentation, I found this little clip that will show you a process of how this looks like. So there is, of course, this steel bar, and the letter is being curved manually into the metal in the mirror image. Okay, so in this case, this is CT ligature being cut out for the sake of creating the matrix, and here's the size of it. Okay, so you can imagine, in the 15th or 16th century and later on, how much craft in a way this required. This is of course still done for the sake of presentation and craftsmanship probably, and we don't really use that much of metal type anymore. You can have a look if you want. I'll post the link later on to this very short video of the process of the punch cutting process. But yeah, I would just like to point out for you to be aware how sort of incredible this was. At least when I look at this, my jaw is on the floor, so to speak. So this was the short historical introduction, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about what we will do. The first workshop we did in 2018 with Verena Gerlach, and it was aimed to create these typefaces for sort of inspired by Warsaw architecture, all the old town being destroyed, or the Ochota train station, which is a modernist station. So we took different elements of our Warsaw, of the reality in Warsaw, and we took them. We designed letter forms around this. For example, this was inspired by the block of flats. So this was one of the approaches that we did on the workshops. Here I would like to present you again this sort of keyframing idea that we have this Baroque-like letters with windows, with round windows, and then they develop or they transition into this modernist geometric window sort of shape. Okay, so this is again this key phrase. Anyway, so then I had workshops which where we illustrated words, and it was a very much sort of like illustrative approach, very beautiful. I find this very beautiful design. We had workshops where one of the participants designed like a Latin alphabet to Morse code variable font. We had workshops where this was inspired by the housing in Schwäbisch Gmünd in Germany. There was one participant that designed, like an illustrative version of humans, let's say, transition from one to another. We also had workshops at Polish Japanese Academy where we would illustrate a movie into variable font. So you can see on the top bar the normal sort of design for the movie, and on the bottom you can see how it becomes sort of like an illustrative representation of the movie. Okay. So, and I was thinking what we should do this week, and I saw this and I thought this is a perfect example of, in a way, a variable typeface, which we could call a digital punch cut. So I played around a little bit with this idea where we have letters that are simply rectangles, and something that is, let's say, a little more like what we know as letter shapes, and we have this sort of punch cutting process in our variable font. Okay, so you can see it goes from the block to sort of more defined shape, and then it becomes the final form for the letters. And in this case, I have 4 different masters, and not to scare you, the difficult part is only the first master, let's say, because everything else is done based on your first design, let's say. So what I would like us to do this week is to design a typeface which will end up being a block or rectangle, let's say. To maybe show you the idea of how then we could present it, I coded a little website for us where we can have all the typefaces presented, and they would animate on the hover. So when we hover over with our cursor, they will be animating, and otherwise they'll be just blocks of black or whatever color we want shapes. So this is my proposal for you for this week. What we'll do is we'll design only the uppercase letters. Okay, so I also mentioned you where the uppercase comes from, so it can seem like a draw, but there's also a lot of sort of references and components that you can use to speed it up. Maybe just to remind you or to underline this, all the letters, they share the same baseline and the same height. Okay, so we don't really want to go sort of each letter is very different and very crazy in case of height. We also have some optical rules that I'll be trying to help you deal with, and to maybe just very briefly explain this. When we have a round shape and the thickness of the round shape, so the blue shape would be the thickest element of our typeface. Okay, so if we have the round shape, it is a thickest one. Then we have the green shape, which is the horizontal stem, which is sort of, very similar but not the same, and then so on and so on. And in case of diagonal shapes, there's this rule that if the shape goes from left to right, it is thicker than the one that goes from, in a way, left to right, but from bottom. Okay, so if you look at the A, the left part would be thinner than the right part of the A, even though if they seem equal. But we will get to this during your process. And maybe just to very briefly explain this, if we have the same shapes, different shapes but the same height, what will happen is that our brain will feel like some of the shapes maybe are smaller, some are bigger. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to introduce this sort of optical compensation, so to speak, which will make the shape, some shapes bigger, some shapes smaller, but we'll get to this as well. And just to maybe explain, this is because in case of letters and shapes and maybe logotype design or whatever you do, we don't only look at the black image or the shape itself, but we also need to consider the space around. So you can see this, the rectangle, the square, of course, has nothing around in a way, while the triangle and circle, they will have something extra around that we need to consider. Okay. And we'll start by designing this 8 letters, Evil Rocca. And there are different sort of techniques of how to start the typeface or how to draw a typeface, where to start. These letters, they have something which is called the DNA, so that they indicate how all the different shapes will develop. And of course, so when you look at the I letter, then we use the same sort of element for E and for L and for R and so on and so on. So this is the first 8 letters to design. And I don't really have any specific sort of, visual aesthetics that you have to choose. If you want to go maybe like a blocky pixel letters, that's okay. If you want to design letters that have the reverse contrast, or that's okay. If you want to design wide letters or serif letters or small serif letters, narrow letters, geometric, and so on and so on. There's a lot of different sort of approaches to letters. You can also, if you want to design something like Comic Sans, I'm okay with this. Something more calligraphic, for me, it's not really, about now. I would say for you guys, it's not really about inventing a completely new set of letters which were never created before, because that's probably impossible. But I'd like you to get this idea of how the letters are constructed, how they refer to each other, and of course we'll do it in glyphs soon. Maybe just to give you a little indication back to this example, what works well is if we have a change from, let's say, round to sharp, okay? So this will be probably more effective if we start from a roundish typeface and then come to something which is blocky and very, let's say, brutal. But this is something that I only want you to consider as an extra hint, let's say.